Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto. And this section is chapter 15, Instructions for Civilized Human Beings. So if anyone doesn't feel civilized, they can leave just now. So is it text 25? 26? 27? Okay. Text 27. Esha Vai Bhagavan Shakshat. Esha Vai Bhagavan Shakshat. Pradana Purusheshvara. Pradhana Purusheshvara. Yogeshvara Vimimrigyanagira. Yogeshvara Vimimrigyanagira. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Eshavai Bhagavan Shakshat. Pradam Pureshvara. Yogeshvara Vimragyan. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Eshavai Bhagavan Shakshat. Pradana Purusheshvara. Yogeshvara Vimragyan. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Eshavai Bhagavan Shakshat. Pradana Purusheshvara. Rameshwara Vrigyanyangra. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Shakshat. Yogeshvara Vimragyangra. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Eshavai Bhagavan Shakshat. Pradana Purusheshvara. Yogeshvara Vimragyangra. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Eshavai Bhagavan Shakshat. Pradana Purusheshvara. Yogeshvara Vimragyangra. Loko Yam Manyate Naram. Esha, this, Vai, indeed, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shakshat, directly. Pradhan, the chief cause of the material nature. Purusha, of all living entities or of the Purashva avatar, Lord Vishnu. Ishvara, the Supreme Controller. Yoga Ishvarai, by great saintly persons, yogis. Vimrig Angri, Lord Krishna's lotus feet which are sought. Loka, people in general. Yam, him. Manyate, consider. Naram, a human being. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is the master of all other living entities and of the material nature. His lotus feet are sought and worshipped by great saintly persons like Vyas. Nonetheless, there are fools who consider Lord Krishna an ordinary human being. Responsibly, please. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is the master of all other living entities and of the material nature. His lotus feet are sought and worshipped by great saintly persons like Vyas. Nonetheless, there are fools who consider Lord Krishna an ordinary human being. Everyone still awake? Pat by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The example of Lord Krishna's being the Supreme Personality of Godhead is appropriate in regard to understanding the spiritual master. The spiritual master is called Sevaka Bhagavan, the Sevata Personality of Godhead, and Krishna is called Sevya Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is to be worshipped. The spiritual master is the worshipper God, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the worshipable God. This is the difference between the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Another point, Bhagavad Gita, which constitutes the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is presented by the spiritual master as it is, without deviation. Therefore, the absolute truth is present in the spiritual master. As clearly stated in text 26, Jnana Deepa Prade, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives real knowledge to the entire world, and the spiritual master, as the representative of the Supreme Godhead, carries the message throughout the world. Therefore, on the absolute platform, there is no difference between the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If someone considers the Supreme Personality Krishna or Lord Ramachandra to be an ordinary human being, this does not mean that the Lord becomes an ordinary human being. Still, if the family members of the spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, consider the spiritual master an ordinary human being, this does not mean that he becomes an ordinary human being. The spiritual master is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore one who is very serious about spiritual advancement must regard the spiritual master in this way. Even a slight deviation from this understanding can create disaster in the disciples' Vedic studies and austerities. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhastam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayambhupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchikalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of all living entities and all nature. His lotus feet are sought and worshipped by great persons like Vyas. However, fools consider Lord Krishna an ordinary human being. So Srila Prabhupada, he speaks about the spiritual master, or it doesn't directly refer to it in that particular text, but the text previous to that, it refers to how the spiritual master may be considered an ordinary human being. And in that purport, Prabhupada says that even if the friends and the relatives of the spiritual master consider him an ordinary human being. So if the spiritual master has achieved perfection through sadhana, then he will have changed, he will have transformed, and people may have known him before he had attained a certain level of spiritual consciousness and decide, oh well, we knew him then, and because he went naked then he should go naked now. You know that saying? They say that when you're born naked, then if later on you're walking around with clothes on, people say, no, you were born naked. You should take your clothes off. But you've changed. You've gained some knowledge now. Now you understand you should wear clothes. So why tell the person? What do you think, Jainanda? Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it? You go up to people in the street and say, I remember when you were a baby and you were naked. So I think you should just take your clothes off and stop pretending. So in the same way, people that knew the spiritual master, or he may have been a relative, so they see him grow up from a child, and therefore they just consider him an ordinary human being. So it's interesting, in the Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami, he starts by saying that we need to control the senses. Then he lists all the things we should avoid. Then he lists all the things we should do. Then he explains how we should lovingly interact with each other. And then he says how we should show different levels of respect depending on the person's level of advancement. And then in text 6, Tristaya Svabhava Janate Vapasasta Doshan, Naprakritata Miha Bhakta Janajapashe, Gangang Samna Kalabudbadafena Pankya, Brahmadavatam Abhakachati Niradama. He says that you should associate with devotees and you should, like the person that bathes in the Ganges without considering that the Ganges is full of bubbles, foam, and mud. So in the same way, you should look beyond a devotee's you could say his complexion, his infirmities, his deformities. He may have a big nose, he may have a little head, he may have big hands, little feet, he may be from here, he may be from there, but you overlook that and you see the devotee's service. If the devotee is very steady in his service, then and he's fully engaged in worshiping the deity, then we pay dandavats. And if the devotee's heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So Rupa Goswami doesn't say in text 6 that if the devotee has a body that is completely symmetrical and looks like a film star and sings like a Gandharva and wears his dhoti really neatly, he doesn't mention any of these qualities. He says his heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others, which is an Uttama Adhikari, someone that is a well-wisher of every living entity, well-intentioned. At the same time, Rupa Goswami doesn't say, treat everybody like an Uttama Adhikari. He says discriminate. So a devotee may be chanting the holy name, but he may not be very serious. So he should be given respect. Krishnati Yajagirita Manashadreta. In the mind, we can respect because it's very special that a person believes in God and has the faith that he should chant his names. That's very good. But he's a work in progress. He's just maybe starting the process. And so it's going to take some time. And then the devotee who commits and becomes a sadhaka, he takes initiation and he's fully engaged in worshipping the deity. Pay dandavats to this devotee. So more respect than the one that's just chanting. The other one, we're respectful, but we keep a little distance. We're not so interested in their opinion. We just, Hari Bol Prabhu, very nice to see you. But it doesn't go with, we certainly don't reveal our hearts. Guyam Akiti Prichati, the loving exchanges, offering and receiving gifts, but revealing your mind in confidence. So you need to have the ability to discriminate. And you need to also see that you may have come into devotional service with all these material ideas of what you think a spiritual person should be like, all based upon material perfections. He needs to be able to sing nicely. He needs to be over 6 feet tall, he needs to be able to lift weights in the gym, then he's okay, I'll accept him, you know. Or even just in terms of being materially capable, if the person is maybe a little incompetent or a little forgetful, and he makes some mistake, and we decide, oh, look at that, he's made a mistake. I can do better than that. Therefore, I must be better than him. So therefore, why am I showing him respect? Everyone should show. I'm the most together person here. I'm always on time for Mangalati. I'm always this, or I'm always that. And therefore, and so based upon a material estimation of what abilities that we have, that then becomes a hindrance in associating with devotees and respecting them. The very thing which qualifies us in the material world disqualifies us in spiritual association. So that's a tricky one. That's why it's easy if you come to devotional service when you're younger, because when you're young, you don't really know very much anyway, so there's not such a huge ego there. But when you've been around for a while and you've run a company and you've been knighted by King Charles and you have got the face on the cover of Vogue and you're a cool guy, you know, and then you take up devotional service and then you think, these devotees are so spaced out. He's got turmeric all down his kirta. His Brahman underpants are hanging out, and this one's late, and this one's got one red shoe on, and one blue one, and a green sock, and a yellow sock. I can't take these guys seriously. So because you have some ability in the material world, then this then becomes a source of problem, and an unwanted thing. So that then is the challenge. Can you sufficiently deepen your awareness of Rupa Goswami's instructions, where he's telling us how we should associate with devotees? We should respect all devotees, appreciate them all, but at the same time we should discriminate. And we should look beyond the devotees' superficial imperfections and grasp the real thing. If a devotee has steadily performed devotional service for a prolonged period of time, then that's worth dandavats. What do you think, Jayananda? We should pay our obeisances unreservedly. And then as that person attains higher and higher heights of devotional service, we don't hold it against them that we knew that person before he became a devotee, or when he was a young devotee, and he had this imperfection, and he had that imperfection. Well, now he doesn't have it. Now he's overcome it. Now he's become elevated, and he's become aware, perhaps even of his swarup, of his relationship with Krishna. So he's progressed beyond, you know. If you see a lotus flower, a beautiful lotus flower, and you say, well, I remember when you were in the mud, when you were first growing, and you were a really smelly character, and you were right down underneath. You were under the water, and you were in all the mud. And it's nice now that you're out of the water, and you look really clean and everything. But I remember when you weren't like that. But the flower has blossomed, and we can take advantage of its fragrance and its pleasing aesthetic qualities and its texture. Any questions, Jayananda Prabhu? You look like you've got a question. No. Yes, Prabhu? Hare Krishna. What's your name, Prabhu?
Oh, my name is Rajesh. I came from Holland, from Rotterdam. Yes.
You're from where?
From Rotterdam.
Oh,
Holland.
Okay. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I had a question, Prabhu. That is, how can a guru give proof that he has saw Krishna and that he has come and that he can bring us to Krishna?
How can a guru prove that?
What you said?
How does a guru prove his bona fidity?
Yes.
How does he prove he's bona fide? Well, there's two things actually. The guru and the disciple have to be bona fide. So if the guru has been performing devotional service for a prolonged period of time and he's been very steady in his practice, he's never fallen down, and he's followed the program, then that's considered like a very basic appreciation. See, the problem is the disciple may not be very qualified to be able to appreciate how elevated a person is. We may have had very elevated. When Guru Govinda Maharaj was with us, the devotees didn't appreciate at the time so much how elevated he was. And then in later years, as they become more elevated and they reflected back on what he said and what he did, then they were like, wow, but they couldn't appreciate it so much at the time. So therefore, the spiritual master has to be a little tolerant of the disciples, that they're making these mistakes and they're seeing things imperfectly. But they're a work in progress. They're getting purified, and in due course of time, they'll come to appreciate. Now, one of the dimensions to measure the bona fidity of a spiritual master is actually the dimension of time. And we're very fortunate now in our society that we have devotees that have been practicing for 40, 50 years, so we can see. Whereas initially, when ISKCON first started, the oldest devotees had only been around for 10 years, so nobody really knew. Everybody was just hoping that everything was going to be fine, and Prabhupada gave them all an opportunity. Some did make it and become bona fide gurus, and some didn't, So, but that's part of the course. You have to accept that as a fledgling society and in the pioneering stages, mistakes are going to be made. And those mistakes then become lessons that we learn from, And now when someone steps forward and says, I'm a spiritual master, oh, how long you've been serving? 50 years. Okay, I think I can take you pretty seriously. You're obviously not going anywhere else, Another way, actually, interestingly enough, that you can test the bona fidity of a spiritual master is by being in his kirtan. And Prabhupada calls that the dadati principle. And dadati is the giving in charity. So when a person is leading a kirtan and he has a very deep taste for the holy name, when you're in that kirtan, you start to experience the same deep taste. And then after the kirtan, you realize, wow, that person must be pretty elevated, So through kirtan actually is a very dynamic way of connecting, bonding with the spiritual master. With anybody, actually, anyone that's leading a kirtan, if they're very advanced spiritually, after the kirtan, you may not realize it, but you've just connected on a very subliminal level with that person. You feel like you can trust them. You feel like you love them just from being in kirtan. So that's one of the most powerful processes. Also, if you're out doing book distribution, that's another way that you can get a glimpse into the bona fidity of a spiritual master, or you're doing service with the spiritual master, or if you have the good fortune of going onto the altar with your spiritual master and seeing him directly serving Srimati Radharani and the mood that he's in when he's doing it, how absorbed he is. And also by reading the books, if your spiritual master writes books and you read those books, and he opens a door into a realm of Krishna consciousness that just by reading Srila Prabhupada books you hadn't been able to, because of your lack of appreciation of what Srila Prabhupada is giving through his disciples who've accessed Srila Prabhupada's mercy and can go more deeply into what Prabhupada is giving us. Then through the spiritual master's mercy, we then get to see what Prabhupada has given us, And we've had devotees leave ISKCON and go to greener pastures because they've not realized the Prabhupada is giving you the highest. He's giving you Raganuga Bhakti. They've left to go to greener pastures, maybe to go to the Gaudiya Mata, go to the Ripviks, or some other camp that's offering things, I'll give you a Siddha Pranali. You can know your Swarup in 3 weeks. We can go straight into Manjari Bhav. Don't mess around doing all this hard work. And it seems, wow, this is great. This is a lot faster, a lot easier, But Prabhupada's also offering it. But he's just saying you've got to stay the course and become qualified. If you do it prematurely, then the whole thing will be ruined, you see. So the spiritual master is very cautious. So we had a spiritual master that came here. And at the time, we didn't realize he wasn't in ISKCON. And then he left. And his way of presenting things was different. It was more rasika. And Prabhupada would never, on the Vyasa, never speak on these deeper subjects, But some would think, wow, that is great. And they'll go for that. So the disciple has to be at a certain level of discrimination to be able to discriminate. And actually, do you remember, Jayananda, what Shantamar said in relation to that just recently? He said that you can't force people to recognize who Srila Prabhupada is and to appreciate that. You can't force them. They can come, they can see Srila Prabhupada's Murti, they can see his pictures, they can read his books, they can hear his lectures, but whether or not they really grasp who Srila Prabhupada was and what he did and the significance of it all, can't force. You know? And for us, our gold standard is Srila Prabhupada, we know, is 100% bona fide and was sent by Krishna. And anyone that has that appreciation of Srila Prabhupada and that loyalty to Srila Prabhupada, then we say, okay, he's a bona fide guru because he's taken me to the founder Acharya. Any other questions or comments? Janand, you've got a question? No? Yeah. Right.
Thank you for your question, you were talking about like seeing faults in other devotees. Is that because of our conditioning, or because of we are kanishtas, or is this a more like personal thing that we should be kind of working on? Instead of seeing bad things, and try to see all the good things.
Well, by nature, because when we come to Krishna consciousness, we're conditioned, and conditioned nature just by default. Conditioned nature means that you find faults and you see things in the mundane way because you're in mundane consciousness. So how can you see things any other way than in the mundane way? So we have to learn to control the mind. That when the mind says something, just because the mind has said it, we don't act upon it. Vacha Vegam and Sakroti. It's the very first instruction. Vegam means urges. So your senses are pushing you, anger is pushing you, your mind is pushing you, they're all pushing you around. And the very, very first thing you have to learn how to do is to tolerate that and control that. Then you become qualified to make disciples all over the world. So that's the challenge that you have is, can you learn? Not only, you see, we're not just learning to control the senses. The reason why we're following the regulative principles is so that we can control the mind. Because then the mind goes into the mode of goodness. And when the mind is in the mode of goodness, it's a friend. And in the mode of goodness, the mind doesn't criticize or find fault. It always sees the good. So that's why we follow the regulative principles, so that we can conquer the mind, access the mode of goodness, show respect and appreciation for devotees, and then really make advancement. Shishi Kodanitai Mayapo Shashi Ki. So you can just take it for granted, it's default, it's just the way we've been programmed by the material energy. And therefore it can be discouraging because you can think, oh, I'm so offensive. Maybe I shouldn't even be in the association of devotees, because as soon as I look at a devotee, I see them in a mundane way. And maybe I need to distance myself so that I don't. So that's something you have to look at and decide. Can I at least come to the stage of being intimately in the association of devotees and be able to control my mind and senses and not just act impulsively? If I can do that, then that's a beginning anyway.
Thank you, Prabhu. Enlightening as always. Just to go a bit further in this, I require a bit more instruction because I fail to grasp things very easily. An example would be if we are around someone who has naturally got the propensity to pick up, deficiencies and things that are happening. Is that dangerous for you to be around that? Should you avoid someone who's doing that? Could that be rubbing off on you?
It depends. It depends how you take it. You could see that as a quality that you don't want to do. It could put you off that quality, and you can see how that's impacting on the person's consciousness and this level of enthusiasm. You think, oh, I don't want to do that. Then that's not a good idea.
Is that in itself not fault finding? So see if you're aware that there's
the difference is And this word discriminate has become a stigmatized word that you shouldn't show discrimination. But discrimination is a feature of the intelligence. So to discriminate, like you may think, well, this devotee, he's chanting Hare Krishna, but he's not a Majjhima Adhikari. That's not a criticizing, that's discriminating. And you put them in a certain category. And for that reason, I will respect that devotee, but I'm not so concerned with his opinion. He can say his opinion, and I can say, okay, that's very nice. But then I'll go off to somebody else who I consider is more elevated and I respect more, and I'll say, I've just been told this. What do you think I should do?
Yes. And again, what if someone misrepresents something that you have done in some way, and then you have to answer to this? What if this is actually not correct, and it's somewhat difficult? Is it difficulty because it's not right and it's a misrepresentation of one's character? Or is that an egotistic trait that you're wounded because somebody said something about you?
It's just the process of association with devotees. Prabhupada said, you'll show your love for me by how you cooperate. Guru Govinda Maharaj was telling his disciples, tolerate, 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 and cooperate. So when you have stones, if you want the stones to become smooth, you rattle them around in this barrel, and all the stones are jagged edged. But as they're all rattling around and bumping into each other, after a while, the stones all come out smooth. So if you can stay the course and stay in the association of jagged-edged interactions, and then you will become eventually tolerant. And it will take time, so you need to be patient. So if you can tolerate that, and cooperation, the proactive way of cooperating. What's the proactive way of cooperating, Jayananda Prabhu? If I asked you to cooperate, how would you do that proactively? Because you could take cooperation as just a passive thing, that, well, as long as everyone's okay and doesn't get up my nose, I'll cooperate. Which is kind of reactive, it's not proactive. It's as long as everyone's okay and they just say things nicely and he doesn't raise his voice and he smiles at me when he sees me, I'm fine. So what's a proactive way of being cooperative? Possibly. Definitely would help. Proactively cooperate. How would you proactively cooperate? Any of the Mataji's? Proactively cooperation. How do you proactively cooperate? Japa could be also, if your japa is good, then that will help. If you're not thinking about the person's faults. About talking with them, yeah. Any idea? Cooperation, proactive. How to be proactive? Have you not come across any tips in your time as a devotee that you found were useful? No?
Use compassionate communication techniques. You can go out of your way to do things for certain devotees in order to keep a rapport with them, so you can cooperate more easily. Doing little things like maybe say folding somebody's laundry or going the extra mile with your service, seeing things that are being done and just doing it.
Yeah, and also by appreciating devotees, to be able to appreciate the devotee, that he is making a good effort here. And okay, there's a certain percentage of him that I find hard to handle, but there's a greater percentage of him. If I had to spend the rest of my life on a desert island with somebody that had no idea of Krishna consciousness, or spend it with this person, who would I choose? So then you start to appreciate, well, actually, it's very rare. It's very rare that anyone believes in God and commits seriously to that and takes up the regular principles and chanting the holy name, and he has some faith in Srila Prabhupada. These are all excellent qualities. Sometimes we can overlook the majority of good that's there, and we find just a little, and that's compared to when you look at the moon at night. You're in the dead forest, the dense forest in the pitch black of night, and the moon comes shining out, you suddenly the whole pathway is lit up. You don't start thinking, oh, I'm not going to use the moon because it's got all kinds of marks on it, pock marks on it. You take advantage of the moon's effulgence, which is far more significant than the fact that the moon has got little marks on its surface. So that means we have to become mature. We have to grow up, not be so childish and so silly and so petty. And to be able to do that, you have to become quite mature, And Kanishtas are generally a little bit childish, a little bit silly, what they get caught up with, and they get distracted from the significance of everything that's taking place. So sometimes it's good to have strong sadhana, like Mataji is saying, chanting nicely. Because you can only chant nicely if you read nicely. Your chanting won't last very long unless you're continually reading about the holy name. You have to hear about the holy name if you want to hear the holy name. So good reading means good chanting, and then good chanting means good attitude. And then good attitude means you can associate with the devotees nicely. So that all works really well, and it also works really badly, because if you're not reading much, and your chanting's not good, then your association with the devotees won't be good. And then that means that your reading will be even worse, then your chanting will be terrible, and then your association with the devotees will be it'll really start getting difficult. Everything can build up and everything can break down very quickly. Yeah.
Haribo Prabhu, all glory is still the devotees here. I'm not singling anybody out. But we'll know some people that read a lot. There's many of people we've come across that do a lot of reading, and yet their chanting might not seem to be that great, and their association might not seem to be,
To you, yeah.
Yes, to my
I suppose you can say, it's like if you look at Prabhupada's letters, and they can have all kinds of good reasons why they don't like the temple president, and they don't think he's chanting his rounds, or whoever it is they're having a problem with. And Srila Prabhupada always turn it around and say, okay, so what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Don't put the blame on anybody else. It's your life, it's your spiritual life, and it's your plane that you're flying. At the time of death, it'll just be you leaving the body. And you can't tell the Yamadutas, well, I don't know why you're getting on my case. You should have seen the persons I had to do devotional service with. I mean, they were so, and that's why I couldn't get it together. So don't blame me. The Yamadutas are not going to be, oh, okay then.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make excuses for anything personally. I was just saying, like the point you were making, if somebody's, doing a lot of reading and hearing, therefore their chanting will be good, therefore their association will be good.
Well, we don't know how good their chanting is. That's what I'm saying. It's your opinion of whether they're chanting well. And it's your opinion of whether they're doing devotional service. And it's your opinion of whether they've got a good attitude, you see. But whether Krishna's pleased with it, we don't know that, you see. And Kanishtas are always thinking that they're as good as Krishna and that they know. Oh, your chanting's not very good. How do you know? Well, from what I can see. Or from what can you see? Very little, It's very restricted, We're very heavily compromised when we take up devotional service. So we have to learn to not try to judge others and estimate them. Oh, well, his chanting's not so good. Well, why don't you look at your own? How good's your chanting? Can you sit there for 2 hours and chant without moving? Nope. Okay, so I think you've got enough on your plate to work on your own japa right now. Don't worry about anybody else's japa. The reason why our japa is not so good is because we're looking around at everybody else chanting their japa and thinking, well, his japa is useless. And his japa is useless. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare. And look at the state of his japa, Krishna, Krishna, Hare. And look at him over there. He's fallen asleep again. His japa is totally useless, Krishna, Krishna, Hare, Hare. And he's not even saying the full mantra, Rama, Rama, Hare, Hare. He's definitely, I don't even know what he's doing here. Actually, Krishna, Krishna. Look at him. He can't even put his devotee on properly. Krishna, Krishna, Hare, 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 Rama. At least I'm chanting properly anyway. Krishna, Krishna, Hare, 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 Rama. You wouldn't see that. You'd be so absorbed in the holy name. You'd be off there with Krishna in your lila, in your swarup, making Krishna a garland, and then the conch goes, oh, it's deity greeting, okay. And then you see the devotees. We're actually seeing our own faults. You see, you say a person is really fat and he goes on a diet and he's thin, you know, and he sees somebody and they're really eating like anything, and he thinks, I am so disgusted. That person is just like a pig, you know. But the reason why he's so disturbed is he has a core need, which is to overeat, and he's not being allowed to do it now. So when he sees somebody else doing it, that really gets up his nose, you know. So when you see somebody else, you could be in a room with a load of people and they're all eating as well, and this person's completely overeating and no one else is bothered. They're just like, oh yeah, he's going to, well, I hope he works hard, he's going to have to work that off a lot, you know, and they're not bothered. But this other person, he is so upset. That's disgraceful. He's like an animal. It's disrespectful. He shouldn't be doing this, you know, he should do it in private. At least it's public, everyone. It's disgraceful. This person should be thrown out the ashram. That's just too much. But the reason why he's like that, why he's so upset, is because he is so attached to eating that he really gets disturbed. But he blames it on the person. No one else is disturbed. Everyone else is like, okay. But you're totally upset because you've got the attachment. You've got the anatta, and that person's showing it to you. Oh, his japa is terrible. His japa is absolutely, because your japa is terrible. Because your japa is useless and you're frustrated with it. Then when you see somebody else doing it, you get so upset. Whereas if your japa is good and someone else isn't chanting good japa, you're thinking, what a shame, he's missing out on so much nectar, you know. If he was just to chant it with a little bit more focus, he's almost there. He's 95%. See the way japa works? You can be 95% there. And if you've got a scale and the scale's like that, it just needs one straw and the scale goes like that. You can be so close with your japa and you just need to make that little extra effort and your japa could be so good. You've made like 98%. You've got, if you put your dirt on, you put your tilak on, you've followed the rites of the principles, you've done the day service the day before, you've got your bead bag on, you're chanting. It's terrible. The chanting is terrible, but you're so close. You're just going to push that a little bit more and it'll tip and everything will be so good. But if you get very upset by somebody else's japa, then it means that there's some problem with your own, you know. Whatever really winds you up, you've generally got a problem with it yourself.
Is it also maybe possible if you say that your japa is not good, then can that affect your own japa?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your japa is not good, then
Yeah, absolutely. You're just chanting Namaparad because the biggest offense to the holy name is Vaishnava Aparad. So if you find it really difficult to appreciate devotees and you see all their faults, then the holy name really does not appreciate that. And if you find yourself in that situation, the best thing is just to chant more. And that's why they say chant incessantly, because what you're doing outside your japa parade will impact your next japa parade. So if you can try and chant as much, increase your chanting, then the chanting will be better the next time, you know. Generally, the best way to improve is to increase. And then you can break the cycle. Otherwise, it will just feed into itself. Bad japa means you become more fault-finding. More fault-finding means your japa becomes even worse. Even worse japa means you're even more upset and disturbed by other people.
and where you have to do, if you want to do good japa, what he said, then is it maybe better when you do it alone? Because
It may be, yeah. It may be. It may be that you can't. It's just too. You're too close to the picture, and so that's why sometimes it's better to just be a little bit distant, and then from that perspective, you can appreciate better. You know, it's actually to live in the ashram is actually quite a challenge because you're closely up against everybody, and everybody can see you, and you can see everybody. It's like all being naked. And you have to stay in the ashram and live an ashram life. You have to work out a way of being able to access the books and the chanting in such a way that it keeps you afloat and you don't become bogged down. And then it just becomes more and more difficult. That's why Prabhupada said, you'll show your love by how you cooperate. That's the hardest thing, actually, how to cooperate. Jai, ISKCON Guru Vrinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Premanandi.
There is Adhoksaja Krishna Prabhu ki. Jai.
All of you. Take care.